afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see you all the presenters, and for all of you attendees. So happy to have you all here. Welcome to our Inside Story, the biannual celebration of new books by local authors and illustrators, brought to you for 23 years by the Western Washington chapter of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. My name is Angelina Obando Maddox. I am a graduating senior at Seattle Pacific University. I'm studying to be a children's book writer and illustrator, emphasis on illustrator. My co-host is Dana Sullivan, whom many of you may already know from hosting Inside Story for the past handful of years. He is a writer and illustrator of picture books and graphic novels. Our tech fairy is Karen Lewis. She's the one spotlighting everyone. She's author and illustrator of beautiful books. She's a world traveler and singer in various kid-lit punk bands. A graphic novelist, luminary, and horse enthusiast, Kristen Varner, will be our trivia master and timekeeper, giving everybody warnings when their allotted 2 minutes are coming to an end. So this year, we're not partnering with a bookstore, but we strongly encourage you all to support your local authors and illustrators by purchasing books from your favorite local bookstores. Dana, if you wouldn't mind sharing today's program in the chat. It is complete with interactive links that will take you to our presenters' websites where you can learn more about them. And we have a page on bookshop.org set up by one of our lovely presenters where you can purchase everyone's awesome books. There will be, however, 3 giveaways at the end of this presentation, so stay tuned. You'll be chosen at random, but you must be present to win. So make sure you stay until the very end. I am so grateful that you are all here. In fact, we have 143 people registered to watch this event. So it's pretty awesome to see that many people attending. I'm sure we can have a great time. Even though we're not in the same room, let's have a really great event today. However, since we can't see each other, I'd like to take a moment to take a poll to find out who's tuning in today. So Karen, why don't you launch the poll introductions, I think it's called.
All right, let's see who we've got.
That's a lot. We've got a lot of writers, 84%. We've got several illustrators. Actually, avid readers is the second with 42%. Very nice. It's very cool to see so many people tuning in here today.
Thanks to everyone who's showing up.
Yeah, so whatever your field or background, we are happy to have you here today at Inside Story. Inside Story began in 1998 when the authors Laura McGee Kwasniewski and George Shannon created a forum where authors and illustrators could celebrate their new titles with local booksellers, librarians, teachers, and other friends of children's books. It's been going strong ever since, and I am super grateful to be a part of it. So without further ado, it is time to hear from our Kidlit presenters. First up is Donna Barba Higuera, the Newbery Medal winner of and New York Times bestseller of middle grade and picture books that reinvent history, folklore, and even her own life experience into compelling storylines. She lives in Washington State with her husband, 4 kids, 2 dogs, 20 chickens, and a frog. Her books include Lupe Wong Won't Dance, El Cucuy is Scared Too, The Last Cuentista, and the one she will be talking about today, The Yellow Handkerchief. Welcome, Donna, and please tell us about your new book.
Hi, thank you so much. Dana asked me if I get nervous. I really do. And now I only have 2 minutes and I use 10 seconds of that telling you that I'm nervous. So anyway, this is my book, the latest book, The Last Cuentista, which came out recently with Abrams Kids. And a lot of times when I'm writing picture books, I ask myself about emotions because I feel like that's the best way to connect with children and how I felt at that age. So oftentimes my writing prompts are what made me afraid, what made me scared, what made me happy, what made me sad. This was a book about what made me embarrassed when I was a child. And it was a book that I never thought would make it into the world because it was very personal. It was a book about my relationship with my grandmother, who I just adored. So I'm going to see how this works out. It all goes back to the very beginning. That is a picture, hopefully there's not too much glare, of my grandmother and my great grandmother and all her children. This is like a funeral picture of my great grandfather Francisco, and my great grandmother was left to take care of all these children. And so there's my grandmother at age 10. At that age, she was sent to work in a hotel hundreds of miles away from her family, where she went into trying to tell stories and connect with other people. And then later she worked on a farm. She was a field and farm worker. Look at my hand shaking. I'm nervous. She was a field and farm worker, and she was quite a character. And I, as a kid, there were parts of that were embarrassing to me a little bit more. There's a picture of my grandmother hanging laundry. That's my father in the background, and they're in the middle. That's their house in the middle of the oil fields. And they were very poor. I don't know if this picture will show up very well, but this is, I think that's behind, it's a shed, but there was the chicken coop. It was still there when I was a little girl. Their life circumstance and financial circumstance didn't change much. My father, I think, is dancing. My grandmother was probably singing. But I lived in town. My grandmother lived outside of town. And so this was the town, or the house inside town, that I grew up in. It's about as small as it looks. It was about maybe, 400 square feet, but I was very happy. But what would often happen is my grandmother would come into town, and I was often embarrassed by that because my friends didn't have grandmothers like I did. Their grandmothers wore fancy dresses and wore jewelry and drove nice cars, and my grandmother did not. So a lot of people know that when you're writing with an illustrator, there's not a lot of communication. They want the illustrator to have the freedom to do and create, because they can probably create far better than what your ideas are. But Cynthia Alonso, who's the illustrator, who's brilliant, she is from Buenos Aires, Argentina, but she now lives in Berlin, I believe. She couldn't quite get a grasp of that. So I sent her those pictures. So that's what I want to show you of what she came up with. So this is that shed that you saw. There's my grandmother. She actually replicated the dress that she had on. And those are the chickens. This is me, embarrassed, and my friend, who's probably more fascinated than critical. But at that age, you think everybody's judging you. This is a picture of my grandmother doing the laundry that's based on that picture I sent. And one image, I don't know if it's, oh, I didn't show you this. This was my grandmother's truck. I don't know how I found a picture of it, but there was one. This was the truck that she drove into town. And here is Cynthia's rendition of that truck. And it's just so beautiful. And again, she captured a part of my childhood and those memories that I couldn't have done myself. I am getting the signal that time's up. Hi, Kristen, how are you? Anyway, that's a little bit of the inside story of where those concepts came from, the pictures, and how I worked with the illustrator, and she took it from there and made it beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. That was a great job. I love seeing those photos, and then what the illustrator did. It's so great. I love the chickens and the shed. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Next up, Barbara Davis Piles is a former psychologist who went out on a limb to pursue her passion for writing. And it's been a very long limb. Over the years, she's created poems, she's been a pipe organ demonstrator, and written hundreds of stories and articles for the children's education market. She is the author of Grizzly Boy, Stubby the Fearless Squid, Cliff the Failed Troll, and Nobody Likes Frogs. Today we'll be hearing about Nobody Likes Frogs, a book of totally fun facts. Welcome up, Barbara Davis Piles.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, everyone. This book came about in a really weird way. It was back in March of 2019, and I was taking a walk, and I ended up in this really swampy area where the frogs were out and they were singing like crazy. And I was so delighted because I hadn't heard them all winter. So I did what we do. I took out my phone, I made all these recordings. And as I turned to go, I said to myself, oh, the frogs just make me so happy. And immediately a line in my head shot back. Why would you say that? Nobody likes them, you know. Well, I knew right away that this was a character who obviously had a story to tell. And I've been writing long enough to know that I don't question the muse, I just take dictation. So for the rest of the walk, I debated back and forth with this character who clearly didn't understand anything about frogs. And when I got home, I wrote it all down. And I suppose the moral of this story is that while it's not recommended, once in a lifetime, you can have an argument inside your own head and something positive can actually come of it. So that's my inside story.
Wow, thank you, Barbara. That is really cool to hear. I love frogs, and that I'm really excited to read your book now. Next we have Elizabeth Goss. She is an illustrator, author, and paper cutter. Her first picture book, My Way West, won the Patterson Prize for Books for Young People. Elizabeth is a graduate of Syracuse University's illustration program and a proud member of the Guild of American Paper Cutters. She loves to teach and welcomes students of all ages into the world of paper cutting through her workshops. When she isn't in her studio, Elizabeth is usually outside enjoying time with her family. Now let's hear about her new book called All About Nothing.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I am Elizabeth Goss. It's wonderful to be here, and I am the illustrator of All About Nothing, which was written by the fantastic Elizabeth Rush. So I have kind of a special relationship with nothing because I am a paper cutter. All of the illustrations in this book were cut using this handy dandy craft knife right here. Paper cutting is sort of exactly what it sounds like. I remove shapes from sheets of paper, and then those shapes work with paper left behind to reveal my images. And since All About Nothing is a big celebration of empty spaces and the power of taking a break, it was a really great story to illustrate with paper cuts. Now, nothing is definitely the big main character in this book, and it's represented throughout using empty space, the white of the paper. And one of the things that I got so excited about when I was working on this book is that I got to hide lots of really fabulous things in my nothing, lots of animals, lots of different shapes. And one of my favorite things actually has to do with the cover. So very early on in the development of this book, we actually talked about having a blank cover, a white jacket, no text, just to really to sort of show how important nothing was inside the book. Now, for a lot of really practical and solid reasons, we didn't go with that. We ended up with this beautiful blue jacket that you can see here, but if you'll peek inside with me, you can see that nothing ended up being the star after all. So if you like negative space, if you like breathing room, if you think those are powerful things, I hope you will check out All About Nothing. It's really something.
That's great. I love it. It is really something. Hold up that cool knife again. I want to see that thing. I just have a number 10. You got this big old, like a kid could use that.
So this is called a fingertip craft knife. There are a bunch of craft companies that make them now. You wear it like this, like that. It's so great. If you're using a regular X-Acto or an X-Acto style knife, I so recommend upgrade to a fingertip craft knife. It's the best.
Okay, I will. All right. Sorry, Kate, that took up some of your time. No, it didn't really. Next up, Kate Jackson, who lives with her family in the Pacific Northwest, a full-time writer and part-time genealogist. She loves to craft stories with elements of history and family dynamics. She modeled the character of Jake after her youngest son, now a teenager, who has been fascinated by cryptids since kindergarten. Let's hear from Kate about the Sasquatch of Hawthorne Elementary.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you to everybody who is here. This is my first middle grade fiction book, The Sasquatch of Hawthorne Elementary. It's book 1 of 3 that are contracted right now. Book 2 comes out in January of 2024. And this book was a surprise to me. I didn't plan on being a children's book author. I was actually writing mystery novels for grownups, and I needed to take a break. And my son, who was at the time in elementary school, like Dana said, was very interested in cryptids. He would bring books home from the library every day about the Loch Ness Monster, about Yetis, and of course about Bigfoot. So several years ago, I took my youngest two kids up to Harrison Hot Springs for their annual Sasquatch Days Festival, which is the Salish people up in British Columbia. That's where the word Sasquatch came from. And so that festival is amazing. They have canoe races, they do the salmon bakes, they have parades, and they have Sasquatch everywhere. And so while we were up there, we took a tour where we went with a local Bigfoot hunter. We met at Sasquatch Provincial Park, which is a real park up there. And he took us on a tour into the woods up along the ridge line that overlooks Harrison Lake. It was beautiful, amazing. He showed my son here, Parker, these Bigfoot footprints that he'd acquired over the years. And so when we got home from that trip, my son would pretend to go looking for Bigfoot in the woods near his elementary school. And that is where the idea for the Sasquatch of Hawthorne Elementary came about. It's about a 12-year-old boy and his new friends at school trying to prove the existence of Bigfoot in the park across the street from the elementary school. So that is the inside story on the Sasquatch of Hawthorne Elementary.
Hey, hi. I'm gonna mostly stay mute because, as you can tell, I share my studio with a couple of children's lit critics. They really, really like that story. But I'm gonna go on mute and turn our poll over to Kristen Varner.
Hey everybody, I'm going to be doing the trivia today. And we're going to load up the first one here. Hit it to me, Karen. Thank you. All right. Our first trivia question today. Which presenter's first name is derived from the Latin root word for light? Is it A, Luciana Powell, B, Lily Lamott, or C, J.A. Nielsen? All right, presenters, everybody get your choices in. Oh, there we go. Luciana with the 90%. Here. Which presenter won their first writing award in elementary school for a poem about chewing tobacco? Curious. Kate Jackson, Lori Thompson, or Vikram Madan? Chewing tobacco. I'm really curious about this poem now. Yeah, I think the correct answer there is Lori Thompson with chewing tobacco. We'll have to ask her if she's a fan herself.
You still choose, I happen to know.
She does she?
Yeah.
Or is it only during baseball season, maybe? Which presenter still has their childhood collection of blue sea glass? I love that. That's super sweet. Is it Nora Nickum, Jennifer Mann, or Lisa Owens? The correct answer with that one is Nora Nickum. She still has blue sea glass, but maybe Jennifer might have a little collection on the side too. I wouldn't doubt it.
But let's move on to our next presenter. Next, we have TP Jagger. TP Jagger has taught students ranging from first grade remedial readers to graduate students earning their elementary teaching license. But he thinks that fourth grade is the best, and all of the 10-year-olds trapped in his head heartily agree. He is not a professional magician, although he can make both pizza and chocolate disappear. The treasure test is the second adventure in his Hide and Geek series. Let's hear from TP Jagger about this newest installment.
Okay, so for me to talk about the treasure test, I actually have to talk about Hide and Geek, the first book. And here's the deal. When I was writing Hide and Geek, the four friends, the geeks, I knew that there was room for more adventures, but I didn't have any idea what those adventures might be. And so they live in the middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, a town called Elmwood, and the nearest town was Grove Park, which was 14 miles away. And there's one time in book one where two of the geeks, Gina and Edgar, hop on their bikes and they're pedaling like crazy to go to Grove Park, to get to the library, to try to solve a clue in the mystery that's unfolding for them. Then they hop on their bikes and bike 14 miles back to Elmwood, and they're exhausted, but it worked. And then book one had gone through all of the revisions. It was going through final copy edit phases. And while that's happening, I'm working on writing book two. And it ends up that it's upside down. As I'm writing book two and the plot's coming together, it ends up that the geeks have to be in Grove Park every day. And there's no way I could put them on their bikes and pedaling for 14 miles. So right before book one went to final publication, we had to dive in, change a couple scenes, do some things to the timeline. And so at the last minute, we had Elmwood, we had Grove Park, we smashed them together. I put a bridge between the two towns called the Elm Grove Bridge. And so now, whether you read book one or book two, you will never know that Elmwood and Grove Park were 14 miles apart for a couple of years, because now they are right together, and that is where they will always be. And that's it.
I love that. I love that. You know, you could solve a whole lot of carbon footprint problems with this. You know, if you just wrote any travel, we could just put a bridge in, just put a bridge, you know, something from A Wrinkle in Time. So I love it. Good job. All right, next up, we have Sarah Cabot, who writes fiction for children. Her debut novel, Get a Grip, Vivi Cohen, received 3-star trade reviews and was named a Schneider Family Award honor title. She is also the author of The Many Mysteries of the Finkel Family. Her next book, Second Chance Summer, comes out in a couple of days. So let's hear about it. Welcome, Sarah. Yay!
Hi, and my apologies that it's backwards. My webcam is backwards, but.
It's not.
So, oh, it's not for you. Okay.
Nope.
So this is my book, Second Chance Summer, and the origins of this really lie in a friendship that I had when I was a child. That for many years, I had a best friend, and she was an important part of my life for many years. We had adventures together, and when I was with her, they were some of the best times of my life as a young child, that I felt better about myself, more adventurous, just things were just more exciting when she was around. However, there were some problems, and a lot of them stemmed from the fact that she was annoyingly good at everything. She was good at all the subjects at school. She was good at art, sports, music. She was fluent in 3 languages at the age of 12, and I was jealous. And it wasn't just that I was jealous, but also sometimes there were some things about her behavior that I didn't love. That she could be a bit arrogant. She sometimes said things were thoughtless that hurt my feelings. And I often wondered if our friendship was more important to me than it was to her. And that wasn't a very nice feeling. But at the same time, she had a lot going on, which I knew that her parents were very harsh on her. They wanted her to be a scientist, and they were very difficult to deal with. And so she had pressures that I wasn't dealing with. And so I wanted to write a book about us and about this kind of friendship that was somewhat toxic at times, but also beautiful and wonderful. And but I didn't want to literally write about this because that didn't seem very fair to her, first of all. And second of all, it's a little boring. And so I came up with the character here, Chloe, is based on her. And her parents, she doesn't have parents who want her to be a scientist, but she is a child actor with a stage mom who is putting a ton of pressure on her to be a star. And that's difficult for her to deal with. And the character on the left is Maddie. She's based on me. You can see she looks like me. And so I kind of crafted a book around them, and Maddie's a screenwriter, Chloe's an actor, and they go to musical theater camp together and perform Wicked.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that inside story. Next, we have Lily Lamont. She is an author of the middle grade graphic novels Measuring Up and Unhappy Camper, and the picture book Chloe's Lunar New Year from HarperCollins. She loves to explore new recipes and crafts and goes on writing retreats with her husband and dog in their camper van. She graduated from Hamline University with her MFA in writing for children and young adults. She's passionate about libraries and served on the board of the King County Library System Foundation. She was on the advisory committee for the Western Washington region of SCBWI as well. Lily is repped by Laura Rennert and Mary Pender. So now let's hear about her newest book, Chloe's Lunar New Year.
Hi, friends. I'm going to be really quick because I'm kind of sick. But Chloe's Lunar New Year is, I wrote this because we have a lot of Lunar New Year books published here. And a lot of times they're mostly about Chinese New Year. But a lot of Asian countries celebrate Lunar New Year, and they all have their different traditions. So for example, China and in Taiwan. And this book is about the Taiwanese celebration. It is the year of the rabbit, but in Vietnam, this is actually the year of the cat. So this one is about the Taiwanese reunion dinner, which is when everyone gets together the night before Lunar New Year starts, and lots of feasting and family togetherness. It's a lot like our Thanksgiving and our December holidays that way. And it's also about when we hold those who are gone close to us, they're never truly gone. And then the only other thing I would say is May is AAPI Heritage Month. So I'd like to encourage all of you to go to your local indie bookstore and check out the AAPI books. I'm sure your local indie bookstore will have a lot of books and authors to recommend to you. Great, thanks so much.
Thank you, Lily. I hope you're feeling better soon. Lily's actually on a road getting home from a whirlwind tour of the, well, pretty much the world. So she's in a camper van getting better, I hope. So great. Next up is Kirby Larson. A snippet of a family story converted Kirby Larson from history phobe to history fanatic. Her debut novel, Hattie Big Sky, earned a Newbery Honor. She's pursued her passion for historical fiction with titles such as Hattie Ever After, Duke, Dash, Liberty, and Code Word Courage, and combined her love for history and mystery in Audacity Jones to the Rescue and Audacity Jones Steals the Show. Mysteriously, the next two books for this history lover are contemporary fiction, including her brand new chapter book with Candlewick Press, Shirley and Shake, the Not So Nice Neighbor. She lives in Kenmore, where she's a very nice neighbor, with her husband Neil and very naughty dog, who's not a nice neighbor, Raleigh. Take it away, Kirby.
Thank you. My first chapter book was written in 1994 with 3 to follow, including 2 ghostwritten titles. A few years later, I sold a picture book manuscript and I thought I had it made as a writer until I hit a 7-year publishing drought. Everything I wrote during that period was rejected, including a 10-word manuscript for Baby Bug magazine. So in 2005, when I heard about Candlewick's brand new readers, I decided I would give it a try because I figured easy readers could not be that much different from chapter books, right? Well, despite the valiant efforts of the editor, Kaylin Adair, my stories about Popper the Penguin never quite hit the mark. And I don't know who was more relieved, me or Kaylin, when I threw in the towel on the brand new readers to focus on a story inspired by my great-grandmother. And that became the Newbery Honor book, Hattie Big Sky, which changed the trajectory of my writing career. So fast forward to 2019, and I was working on a new historical novel, and it was really, it was winning. I was so frustrated. I went to my old writing files for some inspiration, and I found the ill-fated Popper books and a story, a chapter book about 2 very different boys who were thrown together for the summer. And the inspiration for that book had been my nearly annual moves during my childhood. The people who lived next door would always be my first friends, not because we had a lot in common, but because of proximity. There was also a really fun scene in that book inspired by my 7- and 8-year-old nephews, where they would play in my rose garden and break off the thorns of the roses, lick the flat sides of the thorns, stick them on their noses, and play rhinoceroses. The story recaptured my heart, and I revised it with the help of my writing group, sent it to my agent, who said, "What about sending it to Candlewick?" So it only took me 18 years, but I finally had a sale to Kaylin Adair. Shirley and Shake, the Not So Nice Neighbor, is just out. It's the first in a series, and I hope you enjoy these 2 boys.
Here we go. Trivia 5. Which presenter broke their shin bone going up a rope tow in 6th grade? And in 10th grade, ruptured their thumb ligament chasing a boy down the same ski slope? Wow, was that Jennifer Mann, Lori Thompson, or Elizabeth Goss? And the polls are in with a Majority going to Elizabeth Goss. The correct answer is actually Jennifer. Okay, trivia 6. In 8th grade, one of the only A's this author received in English was for co-writing a song with their best friend titled, "Please Don't Eat All the Martians." Was it A, Vikram Madan, B, T.P. Jagger, or C, Lori Thompson? Results in, and wow, all right, good job, audience. Everybody got it correct with T.P. Jagger. I'm wondering if everybody's heard that song. Please don't. All right, number 7. Which presenter lived in an office for a couple of months? Wow, times were tough living in the office. Was it Kirby Larson, B, Catherine Pryor, or C, Lily Lamont? Okay, results are in, and 39% going to Catherine Pryor, but the correct answer is Lily Lamont. Was shacking up at the office. Trivia 8. Which presenter can bend their thumbs backwards to a 90-degree angle? Is it A, Dan Richards, B, Luciana Powell, or C, Kate Jackson? Dan is the correct answer, and we might have to bring Dan on so we can see this in action.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Next, let's move on to our next speaker. Vikram Madan writes funny poems and books for beginning readers. One day, he hopes to also write a picture book. Today, he will be sharing about his 2 latest books for beginning readers called Owl and Penguin, Best Day Ever, and Bobo and Pup Pup, Hatch an Egg. Welcome, Vikram.
Hello. If you've been on this program before, you've heard about some of these books. So I do have to say, when I was in elementary school, I did not write a poem about chewing tobacco, but I did write a poem about a ball of wax, because naturally for a 4th grader, a ball of wax rhymes with income tax. So I wrote a poem about a ball of wax that doesn't pay income tax. I read it in school. I got such weird looks from everybody in the class that I never read a poem again in public for a long, long time. So anyway, here are my 2 books. This one is called Owl and Penguin, Best Day Ever. This is the 2nd book in the series. You might have heard the first one, Guys of Honor. This was supposed to be out by now, but it's delayed by 2 weeks. So it'll be out in early June. And the backstory is this, that originally, Owl and Penguin are characters from some of my paintings. And I just did a whole 1-hour presentation on the making of Owl and Penguin. If you go to my website, you'll find it on my blog. So I can't repeat that here. It's an hour-long presentation. But anyway, these used to be a 1-book manuscript. The editor wanted 2, so now people have 2 books. The 2nd book, this one came out in January, is Bobo and Pup Pup, Hatch an Egg. I used to be a real naive kid. So I remember the first time I saw a coconut, I actually thought it was an animal. And then my cousin convinced me that it's not an animal, it's an egg. So for the longest time, I believed it's an egg. So in this book, we have 2 protagonists discovering a coconut and trying to hatch it, thinking it's an egg. So this whole series is from my own personal life. The funny books about, me and my brother, me and my mom, me and my kids, and me and my naive self. And that's it.
Lovely, Vikram. I didn't know that was a true story. I like. So you're a writer of nonfiction. I like that. I love that. You let me know when that thing hatches, okay? Then I'll have Dan come bend his thumbs back into it. Up next, we have Jennifer Mann, who is an author, illustrator living on Bainbridge Island. She was an architect before turning to children's books, a much more enjoyable outlet for her drawing habit, the children's books. Yeah. Her recent self-authored book, The Camping Trip, won the 2021 Washington State Book Award. Her books are always a bit of, or a lot, autobiographical, including those she illustrates for others. The illustrations for this new book are set in a fictional version of Vermont's Champlain Valley, a beloved home away from home. Now let's hear from Jennifer about this new book, Maple and Rosemary.
All right, this is Maple and Rosemary by Allison James, and I'm going to tell you some illustrator secrets. We haven't heard too much about illustrations today, so that fits in really nicely. So my work for all my books tends to be a combination of traditional media and digital media, and that's definitely true in this book. And I do a lot of collecting of textures and materials in the beginning that I scan into my computer, and then I manipulate them and collage them in the computer to create these illustrations. And the special secret in this book, and this is a secret you are allowed to share, is that I created this great big paper collage, and there are a couple people here who have already heard this. And this is made of tissue paper and magazine pages and newsprint and wrapping paper and some office supplies. And I glued it all together, and then I scanned it into my computer, and it became the base layer for most of the artwork in this book. Or actually, I would say every page in the book has that as a base layer in here. And if you look really carefully, if I can get this in the right place and point to the right thing, right there is that office supply product that I have in my collage, which is one of those white hole reinforcers for 3-ring notebooks. And you can see that here. There it is right there. So if you look at the art in this book carefully, page to page, you'll find little tidbits of the collages. And in this one, you can see, or I can see, I don't know if you can see, little bits of, oh, you cannot see them. Anyway, if you look closely, you will see bits and pieces of text. You'll see some sewing pattern pieces. You'll see some of the wrapping paper and other collage materials that show up in that. And the reason that I use this as a base layer for this book is to really allow myself to get over that fear of the white page, which is a very real issue for a lot of illustrators. I don't want to start with a white page, so I start with a really messed up page, and it turns out pretty well for the books. And that's it. That's my secret.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really cool to see that inside, especially as an illustrator. It's really cool to get a little bit of an inside look. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Nora Nickham. Nora Nickham writes stories and articles for children about nature and STEM topics. She also works at the Seattle Aquarium, where she leads ocean conservation policy work and goes to visit the octopus and the otters in her free time. Today, we'll be hearing about Nora's first book, which is a middle grade nonfiction book from Chicago Review Press, and she has picture books coming out in the future years. Let's hear from Nora about Superpod, saving the endangered orcas of the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. And here is Superpod. And I wanted to introduce you first to one of the orcas in the book. This is Slick. Slick is a female orca, and there are 73 of these endangered southern resident orcas. And in this photo, Slick is breaching out of the water. And when I was growing up, one of my most vivid memories was standing on the shore of San Juan Island with my dad very early in the morning, watching the orcas go by. No one else was around. And an orca breached out of the water like this, maybe 30 yards from where we were standing. And it was just amazing and jaw-dropping and very memorable. And I think directly led to my interest in someday working at the Seattle Aquarium, working on ocean conservation and writing a book about these whales. And I will also say, here's some of my blue sea glass collection, collected not far from where we saw that whale. So one of the things that was really fun about writing this book was getting to go to, sorry, my video got blurry, getting to go to the park where this, where I saw this happen and talk to a researcher who works out of a lighthouse there, which is just the coolest office ever. He's been working there for 30 years. And he writes down what the orcas are doing when they pass by and tries to figure out why they have that behavior. So I got to go talk to him about why do orcas reach out of the water? They are enormous. They weigh a ton. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And it's especially costly right now when they're not getting enough salmon to eat. So it was really cool to get to hear the evidence he's gathered, the clues, and then kind of have an aha moment where I realized, thinking about the context of what was happening when my dad and I were there, why that orca on that particular day probably breached out of the water, and being able to share with kids some of those reasons and hear some of their ideas, because kids make amazing observations, and that's all really important for the science too. So it was really fun to be able to weave those stories into the book and lots of others. And I hope kids will enjoy meeting these whales and learning more about them and being inspired to help them.
Cool. Very awesome. I love the idea of being different reasons for jumping. Now I need to read that. One thing I found out about on a kayak trip is how much You can smell orcas from a distance, just amazing. You know, they blow like Darth Vader on a bad day. Okay, J.A. Nielsen is the author of the YA fantasy series Fractured Kingdoms, the Claiming Book 1, released in 2023. She's also the winner of the 2020 Pacific Northwest Writers Association Literary Contest for Young Adult Literature. Say that very fast. She has spent most of her professional life in education as a therapist, teacher, librarian, and administrator. When not writing, she is most likely playing with her family in the forest, on the water, or in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest. Welcome up, Jennifer, and tell us about The Claiming.
Hello, I am J.A. Nielsen. You can call me Jen. And this is The Claiming. It is the first book in the Fractured Kingdoms series. Book 2 is on the way. It is a YA fantasy, and I think I'm one of the few YA authors here. So I feel like I'm in bringing dark territory to like a beautiful light-filled space. But it is filled with fairies and magic and quests and adventures and all of those lovely things, and really mischievous characters who first made themselves known to me while I was living overseas in Germany. I lived in the Rhineland, which is filled with crumbling castles and meandering rivers and forests that I'm pretty sure are enchanted, even if not officially. It was only natural that I started writing these magical, mystical characters. They just wouldn't stop inhabiting my thoughts. And so I had to kind of get them on page. And at the time, I happened to be in a critique group that was working our way through Steering the Craft by Ursula K. Le Guin. Strong recommend for all writers out there. And every time I needed some characters for one of our writing exercises, I kind of leaned on these guys, and they would just pop up like Clover and demand that I write them another scene. So eventually they were so pernicious that I felt like I needed to just write their whole story, which means for me, it meant asking a lot of questions and really discovering that they were much deeper and richer and more complicated than I realized. It wasn't just fun fairy magic. And maybe it was partly because of the land that I was living in. The humans, the Talrigians and the fairies from winter and summer folk, they had really complicated histories, and it wasn't all pretty, and some of it was really hard. But I found that I wanted to dig into the complicated, messy parts as much as the fun, magical, adventurous parts. So, and in doing that, I kind of fell in love with them. All of these characters, the heroes and the villains. And I really hope that my readers will fall in love with them too. I will say I am a librarian now, and I had one reader, one of my students, stand up in the middle of the library and yell at me for something that one of the characters did. So apparently they're pernicious and get inside the head of readers too. So that is my inside story, and I will hand it back to you. I think we get another trivia challenge next.
We're back with more trivia. This presenter has perfected a recipe for double chocolate cake. Is it Elizabeth Goss, T.P. Jagger, or Nora Nickum?
I am totally taking notes on this one.
I hope that this presenter will be sharing this recipe with the rest of us. Okay, and the results are it is Elizabeth Goss coming in, and that is the correct answer. It is Elizabeth that has the winning recipe. I hope she does share it with us in the chat. We're lucky. Okay, trivia 10. Which presenter sent a copy of their book to Lin-Manuel Miranda and received a handwritten thank you note from him? Was it Vikram Madan, Lori Thompson, or Kirby Larson? And let's see, yes, that is the correct answer. Good job, audience. It was Vikram. Next one here. Oh, I like this one. I want to hear the backstory to this. Which presenter once fell off a camel? Is it A, Kirby Larson, B, Lisa L. Owens, or C, Jennifer Mann? Camel So everybody voted for Lisa. The correct answer on this one is actually Kirby Larson. Maybe she can come on real quick and tell us what happened.
Oops. I wish it were really exciting. I was in Egypt, and when you're in Egypt, you're to ride a camel, and they are very big and cranky. And the one I was on dropped down its front feet, and I flew over the edge. And when I went to get an x-ray, when I got home, the technician said, yeah, no, really, how did you do this? And I said, really, I fell off the camel. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I can relate to falling off animals a lot. So yeah, I feel I feel you with and they can be cranky, those camels. Okay, number 12. Which presenter woke up inspired and used the entire complimentary pad of paper in their hotel room at the Town and Country Convention Center in San Diego to rewrite the book they are presenting here today? Is that Jennifer Mann, Catherine Pryor, or Luciana Powell? I hope this presenter still has that pad of paper. Good job, audience. That is indeed the correct answer. It's Catherine. Let's see, are we? Yep, we're done.
Right. Yes, thank you. Awesome, cool background stories from our presenters. Next up, a former in-house editor turned freelance editor and kidlit author, Lisa L. Owens is both thrilled and slightly alarmed to note that 2023 marks her 30th year helping create books for young readers. Lisa's 100+ author credits include chapter books, graphic novels, and a wide variety of nonfiction. Currently, her writerly focus is on finishing a young adult graphic memoir before it finishes her. Today, we will be hearing about a handful of nonfiction books, including 2 Spanish language editions from her Heroes of World War II series and a 6-title life cycle series. Welcome, Lisa Owens, and tell us about your new books.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. It's so fun to see everybody. First, I'll start with my Heroes of World War II series. And I have 2, this one, can you see this? This is my Women Pilots of World War II book that just came out this year in Spanish. It was originally a 2018 book in English. And then I also have Heroes of Dunkirk out this year in Spanish. So it's exciting to have those reach a new audience. And my inside story is that the Women Pilots narrative was my idea, but my proposal for Heroes of Dunkirk wasn't about Dunkirk. It was going to be a book about heroes on the home front during World War II and stateside. And while I was writing before I started writing that book, the publisher got in touch and said, hey, there's this really popular movie about Dunkirk. Can you switch gears? And well, it was a contract job and I said yes. So that's how the Dunkirk book came about. And I loved learning about something I knew nothing about. And it was an exciting ride to, learn all about that amazing moment in history. My other series that we're looking at today is a 6-title life cycle photo illustrated series for emergent readers. And it takes a close look at each living being's life cycle, traits, habitat. And the titles include Clownfish, Daisy, Earthworm. I hope they're still in order. Fern.
Higher.
Oh, sorry. Ladybug. Sorry about that. And Snail. And the inside story for this is it's another repeat. These were published in about 12 years ago. They went out of print in 2019. And the inside story on that, the skinny, is that I found out about the re-release when a book blogger asked me to write about the life cycle of a fern this last winter. And I said, are you sure? You want me to write about it? Because those are out of print. And that's when I found out the new editions were coming out, and they're absolutely gorgeous. They were fully redesigned, and they did update my bio. They got in touch with me like after the book bloggers already knew. And so I've got an updated bio, and I did get to consult on some of the updated sources for more recent citations. So that's my inside story. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa. So you've been making books for 30 years, so you must have started in elementary school, which is great and very gifted. So for those of you keeping score, that's 8 books she's presenting today, possibly 10 if you go for the bilingual, So I thought about doing just a program for Lisa, but she'd get a big head, so I didn't do that. All right. When not writing, you'll find Megan Pash knitting, sketching, or dreaming about her next adventure. But despite her tendency towards wanderlust, the Pacific Northwest will always be the place she calls home. We're going to hold you to that. She currently lives in a small town in Washington's beautiful Snoqualmie Valley with her husband, 2 sons, and 2 very silly cats. Dream to Me is her debut novel. So now let's hear all about it. Take it away.
Hi, thanks for having me. So here's Dream to Me, another YA author here, bringing some darkness to all the cheerfulness here. So Dream to Me is about a girl who worries her vivid nightmares might be causing people in her new town to fall into comas. Traumatic grief and guilt are huge themes in my story, and that's because not long after writing the first draft, my dad passed away in an unexpected and traumatic way. Understandably, I wasn't able to work on my book for a while after that. But once I was able to pick it up again, I realized how unrealistically I had written my main character, Eva, because her dad's death, which was the reason that she moved across the country from New York to the Pacific Northwest, was similarly traumatic and unexpected. And I had already written it that way. But I knew now that she was going to be processing a lot of trauma with her grief. And there was no way she'd be functioning as well as I'd written her, just like a few months after it had happened. So especially having upended her life and moved across the country. So I thought, this is going to be really hard to revise, but I decided to dive into revisions anyway, and I was determined to get it right this time, not only because it helped me process, but I thought it might help others who are going through or have gone through something similar to feel seen and understood, whether they're a teen or an adult. And I also wanted to address that heavy weight of guilt that survivors often carry with them, even if it's unfounded, and how confusing and devastating that can be, especially when it's left to fester unaddressed. So that's why I deal both with grief and guilt in this book. And I'm glad I did, because since publication, I've had more than one reader tell me that they wished they'd had a book like this when they were younger and had lost a parent. So I really hope it continues to find and help those teens and adults who need it the most. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. That is really, really important and really beautiful to share with young readers. So next, let's listen to Luciana Navarro Powell, who is originally from Brazil and moved to the United States in 2002. She has loved drawing since she was a kid and uses different media to create her illustrations: watercolors, acrylics, collage, and digital. She has illustrated several books and magazines for the main publishers in the educational and trade markets. When not working on books, Luciana likes to spend time outdoors with her husband and 2 teenage sons in the woods of Washington State. Let's welcome Luciana to talk about Happy Birthday Belly Button.
Hi, everyone. So I'm here today to talk about Happy Birthday Belly Button. It was written by Callie Dacos, and Callie told me the inspiration for this story was she's a teacher and a reading specialist and a veteran writer. One day, one of her students came running towards her saying, "Today's my birthday. I'm turning 6 years old, and so is my belly button." So she wrote a poem about that, and eventually became this book, celebrating how kids grow. And, as we turn older, so do our body parts, grow with us. So to illustrate this book, I wanted to express the exuberance of this main character. She's very, very lively main character, inspired by my niece, Emilia. So the media I use, every book I use different type of analog and digital methods. I used pan pastels, which are super fun to paint with. Use a little sponge, and here's one of the drawings that paintings that I eventually scan and work on my computer. So the pan pastel gave me this really vibrant pops of color here. Also acrylic paints. And one of the challenges illustrating this book was showing the body parts. It's not a scientific approach, it's fiction. So in this spread, for example, the character is talking about how my brain is bigger now. And how do we show the brain inside the head without being like scientific-y? So I used, a real brain illustration here as a reference, but then, I had to render it much loosely in the book. Another fun fact is at the end of the book, of course, there's a birthday party and all the characters' friends show up, and there is a unicorn birthday theme, a cake there. And so I used real cake sprinkles for the cake. I poured it on top of acrylic paints here. So the acrylic acted like a glue, and then I scanned it. So to this day, I still have birthday cake sprinkles rolling all over my office. So that is the story behind Happy Birthday Belly Button. And there's activities for teachers and librarians and educators in my website. You can find downloadable PDFs to read along. Happy Birthday Belly Button. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Luciana. Man, I hear you about how every body part is just as old as the rest of you. Some parts. Anyway, I'm going to wish my belly button happy birthday when we're done. Next up, Catherine Pryor is an award-winning children's book author and good food advocate. She's an advocate for good food. She is a good food advocate. Anyway, her books are widely used in school garden curriculum, nutrition education, and anti-hunger initiatives. In addition to writing, Catherine has worked to create better food choices at institutions, large corporations, and food banks. She lives with her husband and young twins on Whidbey Island, where she is an avid farmer's market shopper and local food taster. Now we'll hear from the author about Spring is for Strawberries.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is really fun to talk about. Spring is for Strawberries is the most strategic book I've ever written. Normally a line or an idea pops into my head and I just run with it. But I wrote this book because I saw a real gap in how we talk to kids about food. And because I write about food and gardens, I spend a lot of time in school gardens, farmers markets, talking to kids about how food grows. And a question that has come up again and again and again is why the food the kids see in farmers markets or their school gardens is different than the food they see in grocery stores. And I realized that we don't spend enough time talking to kids about how the seasons affect the type of food that grows near us. And when my twins were about 2, they loved asparagus. And when asparagus season ended, I stopped buying it. They wanted to know where their tiny trees had gone. So I explained that asparagus is one of those foods that only grows in our part of the world at certain times of year. And if you're eating it outside of that time, it's probably coming from really far away and isn't going to taste as good. And at 2 years old, they got it. And I got the idea for this book. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody can agree Spring is for Asparagus would have been the wrong title. I chose strawberries because in much of the US, they're really the first sweet food that we see in the spring after a lot of savory foods. And they signify the start of a really robust growing season ahead. Now, the absolute best thing that happened to this book was Paulina Gortman coming on as the illustrator. Because in my head, this book took place in a city farmer's market featuring kids who lived in an apartment over the farmer's market. Our editor at Schiffer wanted the book to take place entirely on a farm. And Paulina, in her way, said, it's going to be very difficult, but I think I can do both. I think that's just her, the way she operates in the world. So she ended up creating a beautiful friendship story between a girl who lives on a farm and a girl who lives in the city, and her family shops at their local farmers market. And for those of you who are familiar with Seattle markets, you might notice the Ballard Bell Tower in the farmers market scene. She sketched at local farms. She sketched at local farmers markets, and this book has really ended up being our love story to the incredible food and farming scene here in Washington. I hope you love it as much as I do. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. All right, back with more trivia. Which presenter has bumped into Clint Eastwood in California, Hawaii, and Iowa? Is it Lisa Owens, Lily Lamott, or T.P. Jagger?
I'm dying to know, does Clint Eastwood know that they bumped into the presenter in California, Hawaii, and Iowa?
And I'm dying to know if it was really physically bumping into them or just seeing them. Okay, everybody came in with strongly for Lisa, and that is correct. And maybe Lisa just has, you know, she's just known for bumping into famous people. I don't know.
Lisa, what's the story?
Clint and I and my husband were shopping for cantaloupe in an Des Moines, Iowa grocery store at the same time, reached for the same one, and I let him have it. He was there filming Bridges of Madison County, so a while ago, and then my husband and I ran into him coming out the back of a brunch place in Hawaii. We didn't know he was there, but they weren't letting us in until their special guests left, and then we walked around to the back and we bumped into him there. And then my parents and I saw him out to dinner in Palm Springs. He didn't see me there.
Has he put out a restraining order on you yet?
Well, if it is, I don't know which state.
All right, thanks for sharing that. Who lived in the shadow of a Rhineland castle for several years? Now, I hope audience was paying attention to our presenters, because this one should be easy if you were paying attention. Was it Lily Lamott, Barbara Davis Piles, or J.A. Nielsen? Okay, good. You guys get A's for paying attention. I'm happy to report that is the correct answer, J.A. Nielsen. Which presenter once had a job testing the reading levels of incarcerated people? A, J.A. Nielsen, Barbara Davis Piles, or Luciana Powles? And very good, audience. That is the correct answer, Barbara Davis Piles. Which presenter got a lot of skunk facts wrong in the early draft of a book they sent to their agent? Jennifer Mann, Donna Barba Higuera, or Sarah Caput?
I'm sorry, somebody has to say it. That really stinks.
Oh, love it.
It was a skunky manuscript, yes. And Sarah Caput is the winner there, and that is correct. Sarah's manuscript.
Right. Awesome trivia questions. Next up, we have Dan Richards, who is a graduate of the University of Washington's Writing for Children program and best known for his humorous picture books and middle grade novels. His recent picture book, Once Upon a Goat, received a Booklist starred review and was a Junior Library Guild selection, Amazon Best of the Month book, and an Indie Next selection. His first middle grade novel, Stu Truly, was an official selection of Follett Book Fairs. Dan lives in Bothell, Washington, with his wife and mischievous doodle, Arthur. His newest book, Nubby, is what we'll be hearing about next. So welcome up, Dan.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there as we're nearing the end of all this. So this is the book, Nubby, that just came out in January. And sometimes I have story ideas and I really have no idea where they come from. In this case, I actually do have a story behind it. When I was trying to come up with an idea to work on a few years ago, I happened to be on my friend Kevin Atterbury's illustration website, and I ran across this illustration that he had posted. And it's open to interpretation. I interpreted it as it looked like a stuffed prodigal bunny that was heading towards Las Vegas, a city of sin. And I was kind of brainstorming, riffing off of this idea, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to write a story about a disgruntled stuffed bunny who leaves home to go out into the world to find someplace better and maybe discovers that the world isn't quite what they were expecting. So I wrote this first draft where he actually does go to Las Vegas, and my critique group very politely said, that is a terrible story. And that sent me back to the drawing board. And someone along the way said, what if maybe instead of sending him to Las Vegas, an actual city of sin, what if he just went out into his neighborhood? And I was like, yeah, you know what, that might actually be a great idea. So I want to show you the end pages here because the illustrator, Shonda McCloskey, actually put the neighborhood in the end pages, which I thought was such a cool idea. And at the end, you get to see the end pages showing the neighborhood again that night after his journey ends. And I thought that was such a fun way to bookend the story. And I just have to show you how his story now begins with two kids fighting over him and the words, Nubby was done. And that's how the journey ends up taking off. So that's a little backstory behind Nubby.
Thank you, Dan. Love that. I do want to know what would happen if you went to Vegas. So, you know, let's just think about that for a little bit.
Slightly different rating to the story, I'm afraid.
Well, you know, that our two YA authors are feeling very lonely, and they need you to come up with Nubby Goes to Vegas. Okay. All right. Next up, Alice Rothschild, who's an author, filmmaker, and physician, is focused on social justice. Her recent book, Finding Melody Sullivan, is a young adult novel exploring grief and friendship in the setting of Israel and Palestine. She writes and lectures widely, authored 3 books on Israel and Palestine, contributed to a number of anthologies and poetry journals, and directed a documentary film, Voices Across the Divide. She is a member of Jewish Voice for Peace and mentors Gazan writers for We Are Not Numbers. Let's hear about Finding Melody Sullivan.
So thank you for hosting me here. I'm another YA novelist who is not going to be writing about happy bunnies. So I want to ask the question, why would an old white Jewish lady doctor write a young adult novel that is secretly about Palestine? And what happened is I was embarking on my career as a physician and doing human rights work in Israel and Palestine and collecting stories, which is what I do, and writing about them. And a Quaker teacher, after one of my talks, came up to me and said, you should write a book about Palestine for children. And I was like, yeah, right. But that night I dreamt a picture book, which subsequently, as I learned more about writing books and joined SCBWI, et cetera, turned into a middle grade novel, which was then followed by a graphic novel, and then finally this YA novel. And so my motivation for all of these books is the almost total absence of Palestine in children's literature. And it's particularly a problem in young adult literature. And it's also books that are sympathetic and that are honest. And what we see is that when teachers or librarians do teach these books, they tend to get a lot of pushback. So they tend to be accused of, anti-Semitism for just presenting a sympathetic story about Palestinians. So I wanted to have a book about teens who are from the US, who are in Vermont, and who 2 of them end up in Israel, Palestine for reasons that you will find out when you read the book. And then to have that be a normal place to have a story come out. So I'm trying to de-exceptionalize the region. And also I think that writing about Palestinian culture in a way that's accessible to young people in the United States is a way to understand other Arabic cultures that are often, demonized or exoticized. And I also see the invisibility of Palestinians in children's literature as just part of the whole growing culture wars and book banning that are really challenging teachers and educators and librarians to make a more educated youth. And so my book is a contribution to helping a more informed and sort of open-minded bunch of kids who can read a book about kids that end up in Palestine and see for real what is going on. So I also have a website with a teacher's guide and a lot of resources. I know it's a region that is fraught with lots of things to talk about. So I really urge people to read my book from 15-year-olds to 85-year-olds. It's young adult, but it's appropriate for almost anyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much. Next, we have Laurie Ann Thompson. Laurie grew up in the fields and forests of northern Wisconsin and now lives between the mountains and the sea in Washington state. A naturalist and former software engineer, she writes to help her readers and herself better understand the world we all share. Laurie is the author of several award-winning nonfiction books, including Emmanuel's Dream, winner of the ALA Schneider Family Book Award, and Odyssey Honor. This year, she has come out with 2 great books, You Are a Honeybee and You Are a Raccoon. So welcome up, Laurie Ann Thompson.
Thanks, Ashlyn. It's great to be here. So these are the first 2 books in the Meet Your World series, which shows the life cycles of ordinary animals from their perspectives. It might be a little bit unusual for nonfiction books to be written in the second person point of view, since you, the reader, are obviously not a honeybee or a raccoon. But other than that minor detail, everything else in the books is thoroughly researched and 100% factual. Let me give you an example. You are a honeybee. When the new day begins, you wake up alone in a cramped, dark cell. Chomp, wiggle, stretch. Ah, that's better. The unusual point of view encourages kids to imagine what it's like to really be a honeybee or a raccoon, in addition to learning the facts about that animal. I think it also encourages them to have a lot of fun. I'll show you another excerpt from Raccoon. Mom takes them out hunting. Now it is your turn. You grab for a grasshopper, but you miss. You bite at a bird, but you miss. You pounce on a mouse, but you miss. As you can see, the young readers as well as adults can have a lot of fun by imitating the animals. And there's a really diverse cast of kids shown acting out the main verbs, which are also highlighted in the text. So there's a lot of ways to use this book, both books. And both books also have a lot of back matter in them with some fun facts, more ideas for pretend play, why that animal is important, and suggestions for how to help that animal and the environment. We all need things like food, shelter, sleep, safety. And my hope with writing these books was that when readers see how much they have in common with the animals all around us, they will want to protect them as much as I do. So that was my goal, and I hope that's what happens. That's my inside story. Thanks.
Thank you, Laurie. I love that. And when I've seen that book, I pounce and I jump and I bite every time. So I love it. I also want to give a big thanks and shout out to Laurie, who is quite a techie and put together the bookshop.org page with all of the presenters' books on them, where you can go right now. Not right now. Hang on just a minute. And but in the chat bar, I put 3 times now. I put the program, the PDF program, with everybody's books, everybody's websites. All the links work. And the one you really need to push is the one that says buy books, because that's the big deal here. Because we all try to get paid for what we do. It doesn't always work, but the more books we can sell, the better. We'd love for you all to purchase books. And if you don't buy it from bookshop.org, just go to your local independent bookstore and buy it there. And I bet you can get hold of these local people and they will sign the book for you somehow. I'm not going to get into that, but somehow just do me a favor and nobody go to that big A place and buy it. Buy it from bookshop.org. Okay, enough about that. Our last presenter, but certainly not our least, is Maria de Lourdes Victoria. She is an award-winning bilingual author born and raised in Veracruz, Mexico, currently living in the United States. She is the author of 3 novels and several short stories, as well as children's books. Her last novel, La Casa de los Secretos, was published by Planeta Mexico. Maria's most recent picture book is Josie's Broody Hen and or La Gallina Clueca de Josefina from Daisy Press. Let's hear from Maria about Josie's Broody Hen.
Dana, great Spanish, felicidades. Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
All right, so I wrote this book. It comes in 2 versions, Josefina's Broody Hen and La Gallina Clueca de Josefina, with my 10-year-old granddaughter who lives in California. My main objective was just to have a good time with her. And I think that my dream has been fulfilled. We've had a good time. The book is about a real life event. It is about this little broody hen that she had, who really, really wanted to be a mom. And it's the illustrations were done by another author illustrator who is also Mexican, Adriana Morales. Anyway, this story has a really happy ending. As you could see it, the broody hen finally had her baby chick. And I won't tell you how that happened because I don't want to spoil the story. But sadly, the real life story didn't have a happy ending, in that a couple of weeks after the baby chick was born, the hawk showed up and it ate it, and it also ate the mom. So Josefina was devastated. And I said, Josefina, let's just write a book about it. And her response was like, well, you always want to solve everything with writing books. Anyway, oh my gosh, I only have 30 seconds left. Okay, so move forward that finally she was able to convince her parents to get a rooster. And they adopted this rooster. His name is Frederick. Frederick is very handsome, but he's a very mean, nasty bird. And she's afraid of going into the coop to gather the eggs now. And the whole family is afraid of this bird. And her dad is suggesting that they make soup with Frederick. And she won't go for that. So she started a new campaign, which is hashtag on Twitter, Save Fred from the Pot, because she is saving her money to pay for Rooster Academy, which she already researched that there is such a thing, believe it or not. I could just see the next book, Taming Your Rooster. Anyway, if you want to save Frederick from the pot, get the book. Thank you so much. This has been fun. Appreciate it.
That was great. Thank you, Maria. Our last group of trivia. Here we go. As a young child, this presenter's father took them to watch a movie being filmed at a bar owned by their father's friend near their home. They stood across the street as a young Neil Diamond, playing a down-and-out singer, sat on a bench with his guitar. He waved at the presenter, who had no idea who he was, but became the jazz singer's biggest fan. How cool is that? Was that Donna Barba Higuera, T.P. Jagger, or Sarah Caput? And very good. That is the correct answer. It's Donna Barbara. Which author wrote a book with her granddaughter in order to help her earn money so she can send her rooster Fred to an academy where he will learn to be nice and thus avoid becoming the family's next meal? Hashtag saving Fred.
I think this is to see if we're paying attention.
That's right. That's right. Good job, everybody. Yes, everybody was right.
All right.
19. Which presenter traveled to rural China in 1973 And obviously foreign was asked if they were Japanese. Was it A, Alice Rothschild, B, Lily Lamott, or C, Sarah Caput? So everybody went with Lily Lamott. A little trick question there. The correct answer is actually A, it was Alice. And our last trivia question, which presenter lived in Indonesia for 2 years when they were a tween? Elizabeth Goss, Megan Pash, or Donna Barba Higuera? And very good, that's the correct answer, is indeed Megan Pash.
All right, thank you, Kristen, for all the trivia. That's it for our trivia, and that's it for our presenters as well. So we're finally at the end of our presentation. So now is time for our giveaway, our raffle for, we have 3 winners of this raffle who will be receiving gifts, and I've randomly selected these 3. Sorry if I mispronounced your names, but I've selected Amy Hannon-Papier, Lori Sabo, and Susan Flick. If I believe all of you should be here in this call, so please write in the chat, I'm here, or I want my books immediately, give them to me now. So that's again, Amy Hannon-Papier, Lori Sabo, and Susan Flick. You can email me and we will coordinate how you can get your books. SCBWI will purchase those books from the authors from the bookstores and we'll get them to you. So yes, please email me right after this, after we finish here. So
Not everybody, just those 3 people.
Yeah, just those 3. I mean, you can email me if you want to, if you have questions or concerns, that's okay. But specifically those 3 about the books, please email me afterwards. So thank you, everyone, thank you to all of our lovely presenters. It is honestly so amazing to hear from all of you. Especially, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners and viewers here that are wanting to get into Kidlit and don't know how to do it, or just a little bit intimidated. And I'm one of them. So I think it's really amazing to have these inside scoops to hear about each of your stories and how your books have come into reality. It's super amazing. And I'm really grateful to have this platform, Inside Story, to hear and for all of you to be able to share. And so for that, I want to give an enormous thank you to Holly Huckabee, the regional advisor of our Western Washington chapter of SCBWI. So Holly has been a shining beacon of hope during the pandemic times and has been offering more and more classes, programs, and opportunities to our Pacific Northwest corner of the Kidlit world. So it's, a huge thank you to Holly. Also, a huge thank you to my co-host, Dana. Thank you so much for selecting me to be the next Inside Story coordinator and host, even though, as many of you know, it was seemingly random. But actually, I think there was something greater at work. So thank you for this opportunity. SCBWI has been putting on a lot of excellent programming, which you can see at scbwi.org. And Holly Huckabee has been leading the way to increase our membership, diversity, and inclusion of authors of all voices. So if any of you attendees have got a book inside of you that you're struggling to get out or you want to get out, you need to find your voice, go to scbwi.org and join today. It's a really amazing tool and resource. So thank you all for being here. This, of course, has been recorded and it will be posted and emailed, sent out. So, so I'm sure many of you are not here today, but I will be watching. That's great. And you can watch it as many times as you want. Don't forget to download today's PDF program and check out everyone's websites and support our local authors and all of our presenters. Make sure you check out their books, buy their books, or hire for you librarians and educators, hire our presenters to come to your school, read books to kids, whatever you can do to help Kidlit keep thriving. So on behalf of all the Western Washington chapter of SCBWI and my team, Dana Sullivan, Karen Lewis, and Kristen Varner, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you presenters, and have a lovely evening.